Good morning, everyone, and our viewing public at home. I would like to welcome you to the official meeting of TV Toastmasters. We have been officially chartered now, and we have our charter, and I will have a frame for that in the future so that we will know that we do have a charter. And our founder, who is not here, he's up in the east on a work assignments. So Rick Davis is our founder, and we miss him today. I would like to present the contest, the order of business. There's only two things that we need, and the one we're going to do another time. But I want to remind you, if you want to be on the semi-annual dues report, the dues, today is the last day to get your dues in. And you may pay them anytime, but you won't be on the semi-annual report and will lose your charter member status unless you pay all the way back. So I would like to, today is the contest in Toastmasters. We give 4 contests a year, 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring. And the contest today that we are doing is the Humorous Speech Contest and the Tabletopics Contest. And with that, I would like to welcome the contest chairman, Dick Reed.
Thank you, Carol. This is a good time because we will have some excellent humorous speeches and table topics. We will have a chief judge, a timer, and a sergeant at arms. The responsibility of the chief judge is to supervise the other judges to make sure that the contest is done fairly. And the timer will relay the timer cards. The speeches are 5 to 7 minutes, and so the green card will be shown at 5 minutes, the yellow card at 6, and the red card at 7. And the sergeant at arms will escort the table topics contestants when we get to that stage outside so that they can't hear the table topics question. Okay. Russell Britt is our chief judge. Would you explain your duties and...
All right. Thank you, everyone. The duties of the chief judge are to coordinate the judges, the timers, and the counters this evening to make sure that our contestants are judged as fairly and as efficiently as possible. The contest chairman has already mentioned the times of the speeches that are the limits. If you fall outside those limits, you will be disqualified. Humorous speeches must be substantially original in their content, otherwise that speaker runs the risk of also being disqualified. And in all other matters, the judges have been briefed, so we are ready to continue with the contest. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. And now I would like to introduce our Master of Ceremonies, who will introduce all the speakers and the table topics and, in effect, run the meeting. Jerome Manigan has agreed to be our Master of Ceremonies, so please help me welcome Jerome Manigan.
Our first speaker in the Humorous Speech Contest is Joe Schwerling.
His speech title.
I was going to do that when he came up. You want me to do it before he gets here?
Right.
Okay. Confessions of a Junk Recycling Junkie, Joe Schwerling.
I confess, after 48 years in the same house and collecting and saving everything for potential reuse, there's just no more room left. Mr. Contest Master, fellow Toastmasters and audience, I think it all started innocently enough. As I was growing up, my mother would save the tin pans from the pot pies and the apple pies and the TV dinners when they were coming out in the 1950s. That's when I was growing up. For me, it really got started, I believe, when I started working after college, and both the federal auditing job I had and in the Army, they had me doing extensive work on adding machines. I don't know if anyone's familiar with these. These are the cardboard rolls that used to be inside of all the paper on adding machine tapes. So I started saving these, both as a means to tabulate my production on how many rolls of tape I was going through, but also since I grew up with Tinker Toys and Lincoln Logs and erector sets, I thought these were a good building material, so I started saving these. So I've got a couple of boxes of these up in my attic that have been there for 40 years. But I think starting with that, I just started saving these things. We were always very conservative, and anything possible, I just hated to see wasted. I was a recycler before recycling was even a common word. I'd save the Pringles cans when they came out from Procter & Gamble, and the Planters snack cans. Well, you got these nice containers, you might as well reuse them. Of course, I saved cottage cheese containers because they got lids on them, and the yogurt containers, anything that's, all these materials that never deteriorate in the landfill, why not reuse them? And if they do deteriorate, you might as well get the most use out of them possible before they wind up in these landfills. So of course, I similarly save any kind of paper. If you have paper towels, I mean, why waste a perfectly good paper towel because you wiped up something on the table? The next time you can wipe up something off the floor. The next time you can wipe up something out of the kitchen sink. But unless it's gotten disgusting, you might as well save it, and every towel you reuse is one less that goes into the landfill. And one less that you have to buy. That's the main thing. You're saving money on all these things. So I continue to save all these, anything that's not disposable food waste. Papers, plastics, metals. Once the minivan was invented in the 1980s, that was my real downfall. No matter where I was driving around, if I passed somebody's interesting collection of garbage, of recyclable vacuum cleaners or lumber, pieces of wood, why waste a perfectly good piece of wood? That tree gave up its life for that piece of wood. If I can put it to another use, again, it saves the landfill. Any kind of metal cabinets, kitchen cabinets, people are always putting those out. These days, a lot of people, other people, for some reason, think that there's no reason they should keep storing and bringing all these things into their homes. But I don't. They put out fitness equipment, I keep bringing it in. Last couple weekends ago, I bought a couple of treadmills for $5 each. The original investments in those were probably $600, $700. But I'll find a use for them somewhere, or I'll give them to somebody. Problem is, I keep accumulating all this stuff, and my house is so full of things, and my basement, that I can't get to all these things that I've recycled. I've got multiple of each type of fitness equipment that I can't get to, so I keep bringing in more, which I don't have room to use. I keep bringing in more tools, hammers and shovels and anything you can imagine that anyone buys, I've got multiples of. Because after buying them and finding them, I misplace, I can't find where they are. So I spend most of my time just moving my stuff around and trying to dig access ways through my house and basement to get to these materials. But keep in mind that it's just such a sense of enjoyment to know that you've saved all these trees, you've saved the landfill environment, you have the knowledge that you've deprived an overpriced store out of being able to resell these things to other misfortunate people. So I encourage everyone to follow the same habits that I've developed over the years, but just don't go to that extreme. Even on the way here this morning, I must admit, I stopped by a local school that was having a garage sale to raise money for their trip, and picked up a couple of orange things, a little orange a thing for accelerating the cars on one of these car tracks. I don't have those cars, those little racers, but this whole thing was 98% orange, and it looks real neat because it's got all these little gears and things sticking out of it. So I'll add it to my decorations of orange things, which is a topic for another speech, because most of what I've collected lately are orange. The other most recent thing I collected a couple of weeks ago was a couple of very large orange knitting needles. At the time, I didn't know what I'd do with them, but they were orange, and they were nice and big. I thought I'd use them as a pointer for Toastmasters. I would show it to you right now, except that I haven't been able to find them since 2 weeks ago. But when I had them, they made the best back scratcher. I just turned the back end of it, and it really felt good. But fortunately, as a substitute, since I don't throw anything away and I keep buying multiples, I got a little, most people think of it as a strainer, but it makes a good alternate back scratcher, and I've got multiples of everything. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Joe. Timer, would you please let me know when 1 minute has passed? Speaker 2, Carol Kormelink, without a trace. Without a trace, Carol Kormelink.
Without a trace, are you one of those people who cannot go through the day without leaving a trace of yourself behind? Madam, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our most honored guest from Canada, I am talking about litter swines. These are people that dump their trash anywhere that they want. They litter the landscape. I'm just talking about the aesthetics of the landscape. I'm not talking about the dangerous, the hazardous waste materials. I'm just talking about the looks of the things. Now in Milford, we have, and I call them litter swines. Litter bugs is too cutesy. So I call them litter swines because I really scorn the litter swines, the people. And Joe likes them though because he can go through their litter and find things to recycle. So, and I said there's nothing, all that, everything has a purpose, and the one thing about the litter is that the people that have to do community service and work off their sentence, that gives them something to do to pick up the litter off of the roadway. So it does serve a purpose. But in Milford, we have the biggest thing to happen is the Frontiers Day Parade. And at the Frontiers Day Parade, we have wall-to-wall people. It's been going on for about 25 years. And at the end of the parade, when all the people go, we have wall-to-wall litter. Now, I know that people tend to litter where there is litter, they add to it. If it's clean, they may hesitate a moment or two. But most people do not take their litter with them, they leave it behind. And they also, oh, it's just too much trouble to walk 2 feet to the litter container, so they leave it right there. So there are different ways that we as an individual, I'm not asking you to clean up the whole world, I'm only asking you to go through your day without a trace of yourself left behind. Now at the Frontier Days Parade, there's not too many restrooms, and Wendy's is a popular restroom. Well, as I was standing 20 deep in line to use the restroom, I went in and I noticed little pieces of paper all over the floor. I'm going, this doesn't look good. So when I finished, I scooped up all that with paper towel and put it in the can. And it was nice. The next person went in. There was not a trace of anyone having been there. Well, about an hour later, I went back. There was twice as much paper on the floor. Now, lest you think that I pick up all the paper in all the restrooms, I don't. Because at our family picnic on Labor Day, there were 2 pieces of paper that big beside the John. And I looked, and I pondered, and I looked, and I pondered. And I did not pick them up because they had brown on them. Oh. Now, keeping your mess where it should be, putting it in a noise can, is a great thing. There are also some other things you can do. When you wash your hands, there are 3 uses for a paper towel. 1, it can wash your hands. 2, it can wipe up the sink. And 3, it can go neatly in the trash can, and if it's all overflowing, can push it down and make it neater. So, if you do that, will that make a difference? You betcha. I was at an all-day meeting. There were at a hotel, and there were 10 wash stations in the room. Now, I don't know why. I guess people don't want to walk that far, but everyone uses the first basin. So I thought, I'm going to see if I can make a difference. So I used basin number 10. And after I dried my hands, I cleaned up the basin, and I put my towel in the trash. Now, what do you think happened at the end of the day? You're right. The first wash basin had hair, had makeup, powder, Band-Aids, you name it, it was there. What do you think the 10th one had? Without a trace. So it does make a difference if you will do something to go through the day without a trace of yourself left behind. Whether that means carrying the trash in your pocket or in your purse, or as Joe, he carries it all over other people's trash. But I ask you some rules of the house. If you open it, close it. If you get it out, put it up. If you sleep in it, make it up. If you drink out of it, wash it. If you take it off, hang it up. And if you turn it on, turn it off. If you drop it, pick it up. And if you clip it, file it. So I believe that if we made an effort, we could go through our day without a trace of ourselves left behind. Mr. Contest Chairman.
Thank you, Carol. Madam Timekeeper, would you please let me know when 1 minute has passed? Thank you. Speaker 3, Susan Hunter. When poor folks travel. When poor folks travel, Susan Hunter.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, and our viewing audience. When poor folks travel, it's not the average trip. It's a lot more exciting. I grew up in a poor family. We had 10 kids, and although we didn't all share the same pair of shoes, we were pretty poor. And after I turned 15, with 15 years close to home, life was getting too boring. So my father thought, let's go on a trip, somewhere far away. And since we were Canadians, that trip was in Panama City Beach. Now getting there was half the fun. The first thing you do when you're poor is you pack up the car. But you don't do it like people with money do it. No. You know those plastic tote containers with the snap lids that go on the rooftop and keep you safe when you're going 75 miles an hour? We didn't use those. We used a cement tray. That's right, because my father isn't going to just go on a trip and have fun. He's going to build something and help better the world. So he lugs out this cement tray and puts it on top of our station wagon, throws some tools up there, and it started looking like Joe Schwerling's home. And then he said, why stop at tools when I can landscape? After all, a gorgeous palm-lined destination like Panama City Beach needs people like us to beautify it. So he hauled huge rocks out, which they would have charged him 10 cents a pound in Florida, and put those up on the roof of our station wagon. This was covered with a blue tarp and yellow rope. Then we came out of the house with our clothes. That's right, the way we pack is we think after we've packed. So we thought, stuff's on the roof, we'll stuff in the clothing amongst the tools. No problem. Then we hit the road. Now the first thing you have to think about when you're planning a trip, if you have some money, is that you should have a dependable vehicle. We didn't have one of those. We had a station wagon, as I mentioned. There were holes in the floor, which my father had remedied. He took tar, coated it nicely, and put a green carpet over top. Perfect. This works very well if you have cold temperatures like Canada. But when you hit the I-75 for a few hours, that tar heats up. I don't know what was worse, the smell of melting tar or the smell of the salami sandwiched in boiled eggs my mother had found. The next thing we did was had an engine overhaul, because the weight of all that stuff on the roof made our car break down, because we didn't have a dependable car to begin with. And when you have 30 tons on the roof and 8 slimy bodies inside, it gets pretty heavy. So we had the engine overhaul, chipped in our money from babysitting, and off we went. Got about 50 to 60 miles down the road and had a flat tire. Okay, now this isn't so bad when you're on the I-75. You're fully loaded, and you have to jack up this station wagon on a sliding ravine. My father was doing this, and my mother, who is not a small woman, she's had 10 children, I had mentioned, decides she's going to sit down in the car while he's jacking it up. So he's almost got it there, almost got it ready, just eyeing up that donut tire that's going to go on. My mother walks around the side of the car and has a seat. Well, the whole thing comes down, and that was when we had hit Ohio. We traveled down, we went through Kentucky, I-75, we recovered from our flat tire. The third thing you need to consider when you're planning a vacation, and we didn't as poor folks, was try to match up where you're going with who's going to be there. When you go to Panama City Beach, it's not a family destination. Okay, we had tanned bodies in little cars, in little bathing suits, with the roof flipped down, and then we pulled into town. Folks, there were aliens among those people, and we were them. We pulled alongside these little convertibles. By this time, the shock's completely gone in our vehicle, and to the music, we rocked and we rolled. It was like a souped-up automobile. Blue tarp on the top with the yellow rope, all of us clawing at the windows that weren't rolled down because there was no air conditioning. The windows just didn't work. So we pulled alongside all these people, and they were horrified, and I'm still bearing the scars of growing up in this family when we went on vacation. If we stayed close to home, folks, that's the answer. If you don't have money, you should not be traveling. That's the bottom line. The world is just not meant to be seen by you. Stay close to home. So we did make it to Panama City Beach, and we stayed behind the strip, where you do when you don't have money. That's always a warning, behind the strip. You don't stay on the strip where the other people stay. It's not a hotel, it's a motel. Slimy green pool, etc. So I'm still recovering from this trip. A lot of therapy, hundreds of hours, and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm going to be A-okay. I still bear the scars, though. They're small, hideous little ones, and they resemble tiny station wagons. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Susan. We are now ready for the table topics portion of today's speech contest. We have 4 speakers, and I will identify those speakers in the order in which they will appear before you. I will also say to you that all of those speakers will be out of the room except the speaker who stands before you at the lectern to make their presentation. The 4 speakers for the table topics contest are, in the order in which they will appear, number 1, Carol Kormelink. Number 2, Sheila Mudd Baker. Number 3, Susan Hunter. And number 4, Joe Schwerling. Would all of the contestants for the table topics contest exit the room except speaker number 1, Carol Kormelink. Carol Kormelink. It has been said that hindsight is 20/20. If you could live your life over, would you do anything different? Carol Kormelink.
Mr. Contest Chairman, fellow Toastmasters, and our most honored guest. Where's the question? If I could live my life over, would I do anything different? Probably not. But I do agree that hindsight is 20/20. How many times have you told someone an incident that happened to you and they said, well, you should have done this or you should have done that? Well, they had information that you didn't have when it occurred. And had you had that same information, your hindsight would have been 20/20 also. So if you weren't there and didn't know precisely what happened, then be a little leery when you are giving advice on you should have done this or you should have done that, because you have information that was not available to them. And I think because my life doesn't just happen, it's planned by God, that I would not do anything differently than what I have done with my life. I'm quite pleased with my husband, my sons, my grandsons. They're dear, and I don't believe that I would have done anything differently. Mr. Contest Chairman.
Thank you, Carol. Sheila Mudd Baker is speaker number 2. Sheila. Sheila, it has been said that hindsight is 20/20. If you could live your life over, what would you do? Let me repeat that again. Excuse me. It has been said that hindsight is 20/20. If you could live your life over, would you do anything different? Sheila Mudd Baker.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, indeed, I would think about doing something different, except I would be a very different person than I am right now. I suspect that I would scrape together all my money and get therapy. As a teenager, I was one of those teenagers who threw herself on the ground and wept uncontrollably if I couldn't have what I wanted. I was a pushy 20-ish person. I was even pushier and more demanding in my 30s. And when I got to my 40s, I was completely out of control. So by the time I realized that perhaps my life wasn't going so well because I was offensive to nearly everyone. I had used up an entire lifetime. So that would be something that I would do. Even if it wasn't therapy, it might be have somebody I trusted to tell me when I was going too far. Have someone say, you know, perhaps you ought to apologize to so-and-so. And the other thing I wouldn't do is get married, because I think by the time my lifetime is over, I may rival Elizabeth Taylor, and I don't think that's a good idea. So if I was going to do anything differently, it would be get someone who's a trusted advisor and stay single. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Sheila. Susan Hunter is speaker number 3. Susan Hunter. Susan, it has been said that hindsight is 20/20. If you could live your life over, would you do anything different? Susan Hunter.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, honored guest, television viewers. If I could live my life over again, I'd listen to my mother. Mothers always know, don't they? For me, the best piece of advice my mother ever gave me was, don't sell your flute. You'll regret it. Well, college time came, high school was over, and so was band. And I didn't have to use my flute anymore. So, since it was collecting dust, and anything collecting dust could make you some money, I put an ad in the paper and ditched the thing. It was sold in a day. Thrilled. Thought maybe $300, over the moon. That's going to get me some meals at McDonald's and maybe a textbook. Well, folks, for the last 2 decades, I have regretted that decision. Oh, yes. I'm a shadow of the woman I once was because I don't have my flute. My husband's tried to heal me by buying me another flute, but it's not the same. Somewhere out there is an Armstrong flute that someone owns, and it's not me. My flute is my biggest regret. The sale of it has left me an empty shell. So I say, if your mother warns you not to sell something precious like a musical instrument, you had better listen, because mother always knows what's best. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Susan. Speaker number 4, Joe Schwerling. Joe? Joe, it has been said that hindsight is 20/20. If you could live your life over, would you do anything different? Joe Schwerling.
Everyone, first thing I would like to have done differently would to have learned about Toastmasters 20 years earlier than I did. I was in my early 40s when I first learned about Toastmasters 12 years ago, and have been an avid Toastmaster and promoter ever since. I had taken a Dale Carnegie course about 6 years earlier, and there had been some vague mention at the end of it of an organization called Toastmasters, but I thought it was one club, a banquet club in a downtown hotel, and I thought there was only one. Turns out there were dozens in the city. If I had had the advantages of Toastmasters starting from right after college, I'm sure my improved self-esteem and communication abilities would have enabled me, and organizational skills that I obviously need to work on to take care of all the things that I've accumulated over these years. If I had had those organizational skills and communication skills so much earlier, I could have made more of my federal career, which was as a bank auditor. I could have been able to promote Toastmasters so much more, and I would have been able to devote much more time to my family. I had two parents that both lived until just a few years ago, and a twin sister, and she now has a niece. She has a daughter, my niece. And if I'd had those organizational skills, I could have devoted so much more time to them that unfortunately got wasted because of me constantly moving my stuff around and trying to find things, and because of my other activity, which fortunately Toastmasters has superseded most of my junk gathering activities since then. So the sooner I could have started Toastmasters, the less junk I would have accumulated and the more time for my family and community service.
Thank you, Joe. Russell Britt has served as chief judge for today, and he has lots of things to say to you. Russell.
Thank you very much, George.
Thank you.
The first one is to quote one of my favorite TV shows as a child, "Here comes the judge." Here comes the judge. Oh, righty, because we had fewer than 5 contestants in each of our contests today, we will only announce the second and first place winners. Let us begin then with the Tabletopics contest. Second place in today's Tabletopics contest, and the person who will represent us at the area contest if the first place contestant cannot attend, is Sheila Mudd Baker. I guess we'll put this next statement on the cutting room floor, right? Cut off. And that is, these are actually area contest certificates, so we're handing them out today. Please give them back, and we'll get you the club contest achievements later. That's Carol Kormelink's job. I just work with the tools I'm given. Today, our Tabletopics contestant winner and the person who will represent us at the area contest is Susan Hunter. And now for the big shoe. In the humorous speech contest, our second place contestant and the person who will represent us at the area level if the first place contestant cannot go is Joe Schwerling. And today's first place contestant who will represent us at the humorous speech contest in the area level today is Susan Hunter. And that is the summation and finalization of today's duties for the chief judge. Please help me welcome back our Toastmaster today, Jerome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Russell. We have had an excellent meeting. Again, I thank all of the participants in today's meeting. Additionally, I would like to thank people whom you have not seen as a part of today's program. They are people who are essential to the effective running of a Toastmasters meeting. One of the people that you have not seen and probably will not be able to see because he's standing behind a camera even as I speak is Stephen Aaronhouse. Do you want to run up here for just a minute, Steve? Okay. All right. Nellie Bourne. You heard me refer to Madam Toastmaster. Madam Timekeeper.
Madam Timekeeper.
Madam Timekeeper. This is Madam Timekeeper Nellie Bourne. Thank you very much, Nellie. Russell, would you come back for just a second, please? Would you introduce all of the people who served as judge today?
Oh, yes, because it's my honor to present our judges today. First, there was, and I'll need help because I've met some of these people just the first time today. Don.
He left. He had to go.
Don had to leave today. There is also the member Bob DeGraves. Judge Joni Buchanan. Tie-breaking Judge Tom Hoddle. I can announce that he's the tie-breaking judge afterwards, right? Okay. Also a Judge Ben Davis. Now, Eli is my assistant timer. I was also a timer. And our counter this evening, doubling up on duties, was the contest chairman, Mr. Dick Reed. And the Sergeant at Arms. Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. When you come to a Toastmasters Club meeting, there is always something to do, always something for you to do. We need every person available. Thank you for attending. Thank you for participating. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Russell. All right, we are moving very quickly to the end of today's meeting. So it is my pleasure and my obligation at this point to return the meeting to Mr. Dick Reed, who was responsible for organizing all that you heard and saw today.
Thank you, Jerome. It was a great meeting, a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. I learned from it, and I hope that everyone else did. So I will return control to our president, Carol Kormelink.
And stay here. I would like to present you with the charter member diploma that you didn't get the other night. Thank you. I think we had a great time. I enjoyed it. I'm glad that we had such a great turnout. I'd like to thank everyone that I cornered to come here and help out. I really appreciate that. And the meeting is adjourned. Because I told everybody